This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Joining us today is James Gilbertson, the VP of Exploration for Amaroq Minerals. Thank you very much for joining us again, James, for a bit of a special feature, again with some slides here looking at the updated Mineral Resource Estimate 3 for the Nalunaq project on the RNS this morning, setting out very clearly some very interesting and, well, I say interesting, it's very compelling, I would actually say, highlights. So thank you for your time today. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm very good, thank you, Mark, and thanks again for having us.
No, it's good to be talking, James. So would you like to, I'll let you take us through the highlights then rather than me run through them.
So this is an outline from our RNS that was announced this morning of our mineral resource update for Nalunaq, which we're terming MRE3. It's the third iteration of our resource at Nalunaq since we took on the operation. So I'll just walk us through that. So
excellent.
Usual disclaimer. So here are the updates, really. The critical piece is that the resource has increased to 320,000 ounces at an average grade of 28 grams per ton, which is quite phenomenal, really. That actually puts us within the top 2% of global gold reported resources. So we're in the 98th percentile.
Okay.
We're in the area that we really want to be in. The resource is an independent resource that's been created by SRK. It's still an inferred resource, but it is an increase in contained gold of 30% and a 50% increase in average grade. So, as I said, it puts Nalunaq really up there as a very high grade and therefore insensitive to changes in cutoff grade or gold price. So we're exactly where we want to be. So if I just illustrate where we're talking about. So the background image here is all our licenses across southern Greenland, which is 7,800 square kilometers. But we're now concentrating here about Nalunaq, which is our cornerstone project, which sits here within the Nalunaq Gold Belt. And if we zoom into that, this is where we have a historic mine that was mined up until 2013, where we've inherited a lot of infrastructure and also the access road through to where our 50-person camp and our port facility. And this is where we've been concentrating our exploration efforts over the last couple of years. And this is really the fruits of our labor from the last 2 years, is this resource update.
Excellent.
So the nitty-gritty really is this slide here, which illustrates the statement itself as of the 3rd of September. So as stated, we've got a total resource of 320,000 ounces at 28 grams per ton. That's made up of two areas. That's the in-mine and the extension. The in-mine is that material that is housed within the current infrastructure that we've inherited. So that's remaining stopes and small areas of extension within those. But then we've also extended the resource beyond that mine to new areas, predominantly the valley block, which is the area that we've been drilling the last couple of years, as well as extensions along and up dip from the high-grade zones that we've identified. And I think really what's an important point here to make is this sensitivity to cutoff, or very insensitive to cutoff. So if we were to drop the gold grade, which is for the statement, which is 1,800, we were to drop it down to say 1,500, which constitutes a cutoff grade of 6 grams per ton, rather than the 5 that we're reporting on, we only actually reduce the contained gold by about 1%. So it's robust across a whole range of gold prices. So it's a very, very profitable operation for that, with that in mind.
And the cutoff grade is where it's profitable at a certain point. Is that what it is?
The cutoff grade is the grade at which the material needs to be above that to be able to be reported as reasonably, is called reasonable prospects of economic extraction. So it's a grade above 5 grams per ton can be mined from Nalunaq, exported and produced profitably. The previous estimate used a 6 gram per ton But of course, gold prices have changed since 2020 when we reduced MRE2. So when we now use the new gold price, we're using a 5 grams per ton cut.
I see. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So is that unusual, do you think, to have that kind of insulation, as you say, for the fluctuations?
Yeah, I think it is really. When you think about, as I said, we're in the top 2% of gold mines globally. So we are very insulated from any sort of change in gold price and economic situation. We're also very insensitive to increases in operation price as well, with a similar sort of percentage change on cutoff grade. So it's really where you want to be. It's a very a relatively small tonnage, but very high grade and therefore very profitable operation.
Okay.
If I expand a little bit further as to exactly where we're talking about, so this is a couple of images from the new model. So what we're looking at here is a side view into the mountain, where we have this blue area, which is the main vein, which is the hosting vein that runs right through the mine. And within that, there are 3 areas that were historically mined: the mountain block, target block, and the south block. But what we have done over the last couple of years, we've identified new blocks, predominantly the valley block, but also the welcome block. These are parallel blocks to those historically mined. But more importantly is that we've developed this new geological model, which we term the dolerite dike model. And that explains the position of high-grade material within this vein. It gives us a geological reason. And then if we take that forward, it also allows us to predict where we are going to find further high grades that have as yet not been identified. That's what allowed us to develop the valley block. It's also allowed us to develop resource extension zones north of the target block, north up the mountain in the mountain block, and south below the south block. So these are our areas of expansion, and we look to sort of progressively increase our resource along this geological model. The drilling you can see in here, maybe a little bit difficult to see, but the green drill holes that we're looking at are those that we drilled in 2021, with the red ones those that we drilled in 2022. And that is the new drilling data that's been incorporated into this resource update. So I think it is important to understand what is different to MRE2 and what we've actually inputted. So I split this up really into new data or new technical studies. And then off the back of that, we've got updates to our resource estimation procedures. King above all, really, for the new data is the insertion of about 13,000 meters worth of core drilling across 61 drill holes, predominantly on the valley block, as I say, but that's from our 2020 and 2021 drilling. And that helped us confirm our new geological model, which is the second input, which is this dolerite dike model we talked about before. And this really gives us the confidence that we've got the geology right, we understand where the high grades are, and we predict future high grades. So that model has also been incorporated in this update. On top of that, we've worked a lot with our consultants in producing a more robust set of underground depletion solids. What that means is those areas that have been mined and those areas that still remain within the mine. It's very important to have that sort of underground survey really tied down, and we spend a lot of time to get that right so that we ensure that we are reporting material that remains and can be extracted economically. And then lastly, we've done a lot of work on reconciliation to the historical data, so historical mining. So this is records that were kept from the previous operators as to exactly what was extracted and when, so that we can back calculate exactly what the in situ grades and tonnages were. And then when we reference that back to our model, we are able to validate our model so much better. So we now have a very robust model that reconciles very well with the historical production. And now incorporating all of these new inputs has allowed us to change our estimation procedures. So, SRK and another company called InnovoExplo out of Canada has spent a lot of time reviewing the model, reviewing the data, and coming up with the best estimation procedures for a project like ours, which is very high grade, has a high degree of free gold, which is very, very good, but we can make estimation a little challenging. So they spend a lot of time in reviewing and assessing that. And as part of that, and when we look at the model through the prism of the dolerite dike model, we understand and we can identify these very high grade populations and ultra high populations. And we've learned now how to use these populations to understand how the grade is distributed and to produce a really robust model. There are a few other changes in the estimation procedure. We are now reporting an undiluted model. We have that confidence now of where the vein is, the thicknesses, and the grade distribution. So we are reporting that as undiluted. And there's a small change in the density measurements, so the density used following the measurement. Okay. And those are the real crux of the change from MRE2 to MRE3. I think it's good if we just recap on the drilling, which is, as I say, the main input to the new data. And this slide has been presented before on a previous RMS. But this sort of brown area within the vein, we're looking down here on the mine, is the valley block. And you can see these red dots are where we have drilled over the last 2 years. And the areas that we've been targeting and expanding and extending out from long strike and down dip from the historical mining. So our drilling has predominantly focused on the valley block, but it's also helped us pull together this dolerite dike model. We've had some fantastic grades. We've had up to 61 grams per ton in areas of the valley block, and that again has highlighted this as being this sort of fourth plunging high grade that we've identified. But we've also incorporated aspects of this year's current drill program. Obviously, we're still drilling on site. We don't have those assays as yet, but we do have geological information from those drill holes, which has allowed us to continue to validate and update our geological models. So this update incorporates that information as well. And prize amongst that is this dolerite dike model. Now, orogenic gold, which is what we're looking at Nalunaq, is quite a complex geology, and I won't try and go into a huge amount of detail here. But the current thought in how these form is that mineralizing fluids that contain the gold, they propagate through a vein or a structure, and they tend to hit seals or valves, and then they build up pressure, and then they rupture through that valve and then propagate onwards to the next valve. And when they break that valve, the pressure reduction allows for gold to be dropped out of the system and produces these high grade areas. Now for us, what we have is we have a series of dolerite dikes, parallel dolerite dikes, that act as these seals for us. And when we understand that and we can predict and model where these dolerite dikes go, they almost exactly illustrate the historical high grades that were developed in the previous operations. And they allow us to then predict further high grade areas. And when we incorporate this geological model into the new resource update, it produces a much, much more valid and more geological resource that reconciles so much better to the historical data. So we're really excited that this geological model is really working and paying dividends for us.
Just on that geological model and this dolerite dike model, and you say there about being able to predict where the mineralization is going to go. Does that, in a sense, make this project quite, I wouldn't say unique, but a bit perhaps easier to understand than another sort of deposit? If you can almost model it so detailed, there'll be less kind of following the vein kind of thing, or trying to almost guess where it is. How accurate can you really kind of model it and prior to drilling actually be able to know where the resource is?
That is a good question. The adage is always that you never really understand the geology of a deposit until you've mined it. I.e., you've taken it out and you've seen the geology, and you can understand why it is where it is. We have the beauty that we're inheriting a historical mine that has extensions, so we can go back in the old mine we can see these dolerite dikes. We can map them from the surface, we can map them in core, we can map them underground. So it allows us to really have high levels of confidence that this model really works. And that, as I say, we've been seeing this in the drilling, and it's been allowing us to concentrate our drilling and concentrate our resources into those areas, and therefore obviously improve our performance in drilling. But the proof was always going to come out whether the resource estimate, the geological models, stood up when we actually started to try and predict and estimate the quantums that we have here, and it has. So we're really pleased that this model has now gone through an extra level of validation, and it is quite unique to have that in operation. It does give us a heads up over other operations, but this is what geologists strive to do on any operations, to really understand the nitty gritty as to why the mineralization is where it is, and therefore how we can then use that to predict into the future, into areas that we can discover. And we've done that here now. We're very happy.
Okay. I wonder if you can just give me a couple of minutes on the historical activity here, and perhaps why it was stopped, because we've seen the grades there. They look, they're significant. They're really, really high. It looks like you've got a huge deposit here. So what happened in the past, and how come that those operations didn't continue?
Oh, sure. So the mine was opened in 2003 and operated around 2013 under two operators, True Gold and Angel Mining. Both operators eventually ceased to exist, and it was through various issues. I think the first issue was reduction in gold price at the time, but the main issue that the previous operators had is that they went into the operation without really expanding the resource beyond them. So they identified the first high grade areas and they mined those. And once they had depleted a certain area, they had very little information as to where to go to next. They didn't have this dolerite dike model, for example. They had no idea. So they started scout drilling and wildcatting around to try and find where the next high grade was. That's a very, very expensive way of doing exploration. What you want to do is you obviously want to take a step back and you want to build your resource base before you go into operation, and then progressively update and replenish your reserves as you mine. And that's something that didn't happen. There are other aspects as well. The operators were also quite heavily involved in other projects around the globe, which was stretching their resources and stuff. So it wasn't a purely Nalunaq issue. But it went into clear maintenance and enclosure around 2014, which is where Amaroq picked up the license, because we felt that the story Nalunaq had not been told in full. Mm-hmm. And this resource estimate really shows us and gives us that stepping stone into the future of Nalunaq, and gives us the optionality now. We know where the resources are. We know how to predict these. We know how we can expand upon these resources. It now gives us the impetus to really go back in there and start to prove ourselves up.
Okay, that's good. That explained that very well. So just on Amaroq's approach to this then, how are you going to tackle this? You say you've identified these dolerite dike, this model. Are you going to continue to build the resource base and try and build a whole plan looking way beyond when you're going to start mining, so that when you do, you've got that already sort of forecast and prepared, so that you don't fall, let's say, into the same trap of getting too fixated on one really high level, high grade gold area?
That is exactly correct. So we've obviously identified the valley block, and this may be an area we have been considering various options to go in underground into the valley block. But what the dolerite dike model has given us is we don't have just the valley block, we have the wealth block, we have extensions to target the mountain and the south block. And really what we want to get is we want to get to a position where we have multiple heads to any operation. So if we were to go into mining in the valley block, for example, that we are in parallel extending and building upon our resources in the mountain block, for example. And that is where we think we might go to next, in that mountain block. This new resource estimate is illustrated the potential further up the mountain in that direction. So we already have two areas to attack, so we can mine on one and expand on another. And that's really the way to play something like this, is that you need to have those multiple heads, not just for production, but equally for exploration.
And just looking at the picture there, we can clearly see roads have been put in there. You can see the valley block, that's lower down, should be fairly easy to access. How difficult is access there, particularly as you're going up to the mountain block?
Yeah, so there is portals, historical portals. There's access right from the 300 level all the way up to the 600 level. So we've got multiple areas of access, and this year we have actually opened up the 450 level so that we can go in way up into the operation and have a very short distance from us to, say, the mountain block, for example. So there are many ways to get into the operation, and the ground conditions are really quite phenomenal. The ground stands up very, very well. It's very hard rock. It's a geotechnical dream in that way. So we can go back in. We can reutilize the past infrastructure very, very easily, and that's something that we're looking into. Is an option to do that, or there's an option equally to open up our own infrastructure, the valley block, which is as yet not being accessed by any development.
Okay, excellent. And what comes next then? You've got Mineral Resource Estimate 3. So what comes next? Mineral Resource Estimate 4, or do you start moving into sort of pre-feasibility, feasibility studies?
Yeah, so I think it's important to realise that this MRE3 is an update from all our data and models and reconciliation data from 2020, 2021. It doesn't incorporate the drilling that we're currently doing in 2022 and any new insights that we have from this year. So there's obviously potential for updates there, but really what we want to do is we want to now this model is the fruits of our labor in so many ways that we now want to use this model to help us predict where to expand that resource and where to conduct drilling in our next exercise into 2023. But equally, it gives us firm handle now to look at options, various options. So that may involve sort of trial mining or pilot mining in one or other of these higher grade areas, so that we can pull out material and gain greater confidence in these resources. Now, we're at an inferred level of our resource estimate at the moment. We want to increase that into indicated and measured. And that may require us going in underground into either the existing development or making our own development and expanding on that and building that resource confidence. So that's really where we want to go to now. We've got the foundations, something really good. We know how the model's working, how the gold is being deposited. We now want to build from that foundation out into expanding that resource, but equally expanding the confidence that we have that resource, so that we have that full optionality as to whether we continue to explore this and we go into production as soon as possible.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, James Gilbertson, the VP of Exploration at Amaroq Minerals. Thank you very much for explaining that for us today.
Thank you, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.